What is up, you guys? UFC 294. We got an extremely stacked card taking place this upcoming weekend. Take note, the card will be taking place at a different than normal time. I know that in the United States, it's going to be taking place during the afternoon. So remember, this card is taking place in Abu Dhabi. There's a little bit of an adjustment with the start time of the card. We've had some adjustments on this main card. 3 fights on the main card had to have some changes made. First and foremost, we had Elliott getting a new opponent as Nasruddin Imavov pulled out. He now takes on Warley Alves, the always tough Brazilian fighter. It's not a bad matchup there. It's somewhat of a good replacement fight. And then, of course, Kamaru Usman steps in on short notice to take Khamzat Chimaev on as Paulo Costa says that he needs some type of surgery. That was very weird how that all happened. And it was very strange how that happened at the same time that Charles Oliveira had to pull out due to that injury. It was very disappointing. But I love these newly added matchups. The only thing that kind of hinders them a little bit is the fact that Volkanovski and Usman are taking these fights on short notice. So, we'll see how they perform and we'll see how the cardio holds up. Also, take note, Kamaru Usman and Khamzat Chimaev, that match, the winner gets an immediate middleweight title shot against Sean Strickland. So big stakes there. And, Alexander Volkanovski definitely has redemption on his mind. So you guys know how we do it here. We're going to start with the first fight. We're going to work our way up to the top of this card. We're going to be breaking down all these fights from a betting perspective and how we see these fights just playing out overall. Take note, there's a lot of heavy favorites all throughout this card. So I will dissect this card in maybe a little bit of a different manner. We'll talk about unders. We'll talk about over-unders. We'll talk about maybe value even on some of those dogs, or just maybe some parlays you want to work together. But just remember, there's some heavy favorites, so I don't want to be hearing any crap from you guys in the comment section saying, oh, you're taking all these favorites. And there's some heavily favorited fighters all throughout this card. All right, also, we're coming off another profitable event. We slammed UFC Vegas 81. We hit 3 of our 4 official plays, losing only the smallest play, which was a last-minute play that I put together on Cameron Simon. Was a little annoyed that I did that, but thought that he looked pretty decent at the weigh-ins and whatnot. Put a little stab on him. Other than that, we hit all 3 of our official plays. We had some big plays out there. You guys can check the recap video here of UFC Vegas 81 on the channel. And if you guys are looking to work with me for this video, do not hesitate to reach out to me. Shoot me a message. You guys know I have some big action mixed up on this card. Also, if you sign up through Bovada to Bovada.lv through my referral link, I will give you this entire card for my official plays for free. All right, guys. Had to get that all out, man. This is a big card. I got a big cup of coffee right next to me, and I'm about to go off. I'm telling you guys, I did a lot of research on this card, okay? I put in a lot of time. Let's get to this first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
You got to be kidding me here. This is the first fight of the event taking place in the middleweight division. The very dangerous and fun to watch Bruno Silva welcomes in one of the hottest prospects in the game, Sharabutdin Magomedov. Magomedov of Dagestani descent. This is a guy that's actually known for his striking, though not his grappling. He is a very dangerous striker. This guy goes out there and just knocks out everyone that he faces off against. If you're not familiar with him, maybe you guys have seen a little something about him online. He's the fighter that has one eye. He kind of has that Bisping thing going on in his other eye socket there. He kind of has a mean streak to him. We've seen him go out there, knock dudes out in the cage, and kind of step over their bodies, take a step on their body as he walks over them. We saw him in a grappling match, gave a guy a little kick during the grappling match. He was upset with him about something. This guy really has a mean streak to him. Kind of has that... He kind of seems like a character in a movie, right? With the one eye and just the grisly look to him. And understand that he is a very fine-tuned fighter. I'm very high on him, and I think that he has potential to wreak havoc in the UFC's middleweight division. He'll fit right in with the best of them, as he has that very polished striking skill set. You guys know that this division has been pretty much dominated by striking-based fighters. And even though, again, that he is a Dagestani fighter, I think that he needs to fine-tune his grappling and his wrestling a little bit more so if he does face off with a fighter that could bring that threat to him. I don't think that's going to be the case here, though. I think that Bruno Silva is going to be more than willing to engage in a firefight on the feet. Bruno Silva has some grappling skills. maybe he could try to mix that in, but I really feel that he's going to go out here and look to put on a show. This is just a fighter that's so tough. I mean, we saw him matched up with Alex Pereira back in the day, and he knew the skill set that Pereira was bringing into the cage that day, and Bruno Silva essentially stood and traded with him for 15 minutes. I mean, for the vast majority of that fight, they stood and traded, and Silva had success in that fight on the feet as well. Okay, so you understand that. Wasn't able to finish Pereira, but he's went out there and knocked out guys like Brad Tavares, Jordan Wright, Andrew Sanchez, Wellington Turman, and then even outside the UFC, has so many knockouts on his resume. A knockout over Alexander Shlemenko, a legend in the game, never made it to the UFC, but one of the most dangerous Russian fighters that we've ever seen, even though it was later on in his career. Just understand that Bruno Silva is a knockout artist. He's a very, very dangerous striker. And although I kind of believe that Magomedov's chink in his armor to say, I don't even know if I would say it's a chink in his armor, but one of his weak spots is his grappling. I think that Bruno Silva actually still brings more of a threat with the striking than even if he goes out there and tries to use the grappling. Because although I think Magomedov's the better striker and I'm favoring him to win this fight, and I think he'll get the better of the striking exchanges, Bruno Silva is still extremely dangerous. This is the middleweight division. These guys are big, and it takes one shot to end the fight. Okay, understand that. Do not overlook Bruno Silva here. That being said, I do believe that Magomedov is just going to be too fine-tuned for him. I think that he's going to be extremely confident. I don't see the UFC jitters hitting him. I think this is a guy that just looks to go to war right from the get-go. This guy's going to be ready for it all. This is a guy that has maybe more experience than some of you guys realize as well. So take note. Even though he's 11-0 as a pro, he has a variety of these mixed rules types of fights where he's went out there and got his hand raised in all of those as well. So he has more experience than just the 11 fights. This is a guy that will be ready for this occasion. I'm picking him to win the fight. I'm going to say, it's hard to say that he's going to get a knockout here because Bruno Silva, out of 32 professional fights, he's only been knocked out once, okay? Even though Magomedov's knocked out basically everybody that he's faced off against. Bruno Silva has just been, he's been so tough and so durable. It's kind of hard to say that he's going to get that knockout. You know what, though, man? I'm going to say that Magomedov gets the finish here because I think these guys are really going to clash, and I just think that someone's going to get finished here, and I'm going to lean towards Silva getting finished based on the fact that Magomedov is just going to be a little bit sharper. Maybe one of those kicks gets up there. He's dangerous with his boxing. He's a good fighter, man. So I'm taking him to get the job done, and I'll say we see a finish in this fight, man. Magomedov right now, he's a -204 in Jazz Sports, opened up as a -314. So you guys kind of see what I'm talking about here as people are putting some respect on Bruno Silva's name. Everyone's so hyped up for the Magomedov debut, but when things slow down, you take a look at the betting odds, you see the movement coming in on Silva, actually. I guess depending on what book, where the lines opened up. Now, on Bovada, he opened up as a -200. You see slight movement towards Magomedov's way. But for the lines that have had more time to marinate, like you take a look over on Bet Online, Magomedov opens up as a -300. He's now -192. So people putting respect on Bruno Silva's name, they kind of understand that this is going to be a clash in the feet. You never know what's going to happen. I will take Sharabutdin, Magomedov to get the job done. He'll just be a little bit more light on his feet, a little bit quicker with his striking, and I think he's the truth. Over to the women's strawweight division, Jinh Frey possibly getting one more opportunity to fight in the octagon. She's on a 3-fight losing skid. She's 38 years old, a former Invicta champion. She's had her ups and downs. I would definitely emphasize the downs a lot more than the ups. Definitely more losses occurring than victories here, but she's a decent fighter, comes in physically fit, even for her age. She'll be physically fit here once again, has that southpaw stance. She's decently well-rounded, but then you got this newcomer, Victoria Dudakova. Well, I shouldn't say a newcomer. She's fought in the UFC once now, came off Dana White's Contender Series, so essentially 2-0 under the UFC banner, but still very young, 24 years old. This is the new wave of women's mixed martial arts. She's a very, very bright prospect in the game, if you ask me. She has a bunch of accomplishments as an amateur. She was a bronze medalist in these amateur MMA tournaments and whatnot. I mean, she's been fighting for a long time. She started off as a swimmer. This was a girl that wanted to become, or essentially her parents were trying to groom her to become a Olympic swimmer, and then she transitioned into the sport of MMA at a very young age. And so just understand that this is a real athlete. And she's a very well-rounded fighter. We saw her on Dana White's Contender Series just pushing the pace on her opponent. I believe it was Maria Silva, who Maria Silva even bounced back with a pretty big victory after that fight too. So I think Maria Silva actually a decent fighter. I think she was undefeated before that fight. And Dudakova went in there and just broke her down, pushed the pace like crazy, showed well-roundedness, but really in that fight was pushing the pace with the grappling and the ground and pound, which I love to see from fighters when you're talking women's mixed martial arts, because if a fighter has that little edge in the grappling and can push the pace, we've seen a lot of fighters like that just go out there and just break their opponents, right? Consistently getting takedowns and just working them. And I think that we might be seeing that here once again. Now, in her last fight, in her UFC debut, it ended in a strange way. If you remember, Estela Nunez snapped her arm there as Dudakova kind of shot a takedown and Nunez went to kind of post up. We really didn't get to see that fight play out, other than we saw Dudakova throw a couple strikes that they look decent. They look kind of sharp. You see that she's working on her overall craft. I'm just going to let you guys know that I expect her striking to continuously grow. I think her striking will look better and better fight to fight. She's only 24 years old. And I think just the sheer volume and pace and youthfulness that she's going to have in this fight is going to be more than enough to break down Jinh Frey. Jinh Frey, talked about the downs that she's had. She's on a 3-fight losing skid, losing to Elise Reed and Vanessa Demopoulos, and also Polyana Viana. But the Elise Reed and Vanessa Demopoulos fights, they didn't really age that well. Demopoulos should have just lost her last fight. Elise Reed's been losing time and time again. Just got beaten down by Lupi Godinez. And I think that Dudakova just has so much more promise, if you will. I think that her ceiling will be much higher than Frey's ever was. And not to be too harsh on Frey, I mean, victories over Ashley Yoder and Gloria DePaula, those are two fighters that are not even UFC caliber. Yoder just took a loss, and she's doing other things outside the UFC, and she'll be gone. Gloria DePaula's had a real tough time getting victories in the UFC. I think she's gone essentially now too. So there's really nothing to talk about as far as victories for Jinh Frey. She's almost a 500 fighter. She's 11-9, and I'm being a little harsh on her just because I want to make it clear. I think that Dudakova just is going to go out here and take control of this fight. Dudakova opened up as a -314 favorite. She's now a -400 favorite. It's a little bit of a steep line. Again, I warned you guys at the beginning of this video, there's going to be a lot of heavy lines on this card. There's a lot of big-time favorites. So you got to think of certain ways you want to work with this card. You want to mix in some 2-team parlays. If you want to get a little crazy, mix in your 3-team parlays. And for some of you wild boys out there, throw your 7, 6, and 17 parlays. Is Dudakova a piece that you want to mix in? I think potentially that she is. I know it's a women's strawweight bout, which sometimes can play out a little flaky. I know Dudakova is very young, and we need to see more from her. But I'm letting you guys know she's going to have that pressure, that pace, and expect her striking to even look sharper, like I said. And I think she just works Frey in this fight, okay? Does she get a finish? We could talk about the under, and does she get a finish on Frey? Frey, out of her 9 losses, she's been knocked out 3 times. She's been subbed once. So almost half of those losses coming by way of finish. As of recently, just finished by Polyana Viana. She got caught with a shot there. Viana actually has some pop on her shot, though. Dudakova, a little bit more of a volume-type fighter. She's going to have to break Frey late in this fight. Maybe she can get on top of her, maybe set up a sub. I wouldn't necessarily steer you guys to favor towards a finish or something like that on a fight like this. Dudakova gets the job done. I'll aim more towards a decision, really breaking down Frey. Maybe a late finish in the 3rd round. To the featherweight division, we got Nathaniel Wood taking on Mohammad Naimov. If you remember Naimov, he came into his Dana White's Contender Series fight a while back in one of the earlier seasons. He was a big favorite, and he dropped the ball against Colin Anglin. Colin Anglin, a fighter that never really proved to be much at all, even after that victory. So that wasn't a good look. The matchup going into that fight, Naimov is known for his striking. That's what he does. He's a very sharp striker, as we'll talk about his last victory, his UFC debut, where he had a huge knockout over Jamie Malarkey. Okay, but in the Colin Anglin fight, he wasn't able to create enough space and keep Anglin off him enough in order to get the job done there. Also took a loss against Oliver Murad. That was a little bit of the case in that fight as well. Murad was a fighter that fought on Dana White's Contender Series as well. I believe he even had a victory, but didn't get signed, if I remember correctly. So 2 losses there, but now he's on a 4-fight winning streak. Had a submission, 2 knockouts, and a decision. Also had a knockout over a Dylan Schultz. But listen, again, I wanted to circle back to this Jamie Mullarkey knockout. In that fight, you understand, and we saw how dangerous Naimov can be with his striking, okay? He has serious power. He seemed like he was very undersized in that fight. Didn't even matter. I think he took that fight on short notice as well, if I remember correctly. Didn't matter. When he lands, he can end the fight on anybody. I think that's a fact. Nathaniel Wood is such a crafty, damn fighter. He's a fighter that I have counted out before. I had Andre Fili against him in his last fight, and it was a very close fight, actually, but still, Wood is just, he's so cerebral in there. He knows when to make the right moves. He knows when to go to his grappling. And I think that aspect of his game is very underrated. Just the way he mixes everything together, and he has a very high fighter IQ. Victory over Charles Jourdain, Charles Rosa as well. His last loss was against Casey Kenny. I mentioned him last week. You know, Casey Kenny, a very, very good fighter that has just kind of disappeared from the sport for whatever reason, but a very talented fighter. Victory over John Castaneda. And then he was knocked out against John Dodson. And I believe that was, no, that wasn't his UFC debut. Excuse me. He had 3 fights before that, but that was his first loss in the UFC. And John Dodson, man, the magician, you guys know the deal with John Dodson, man. What a tricky fighter he was. He now fights over in the bare knuckle FC scene and still out there starching dudes. And, you know, he caught Nathaniel Wood. John Dodson's also a fighter that caught TJ Dillashaw back when he was creeping to his prime. So maybe we shouldn't look at that fight, you know, under the magnifying glass too much. Nathaniel Wood learned from that mistake. He's very defensively sound, and I have to favor, I'm not going to count Nathaniel Wood out again here. I have to favor that Nathaniel Wood is going to be able to implement the right tactics to get the job done here. He's going to play it very safe, and just going to try to avoid too many striking exchanges. I think he's going to close the distance a lot. He's going to hang on Naimov. He's going to look to get this fight down to the mat, and Naimov's going to be you know, crawling and scratching to get that distance and try to land those big shots. But I think that Wood is just going to be a leech on him, and I have to favor that will lead to Wood getting the job done. But if Naimov can create that space, he definitely will have the potential to bust Nathaniel Wood open. We actually saw Nathaniel Wood bleeding quite a bit in that Fili fight. It was a similar type of fight there, where Wood was, you know, pushing the pace, using that pressure style, and Fili was trying to create distance to land some damage. And we saw Wood bloodied up in that fight, but still pushes through and finished the 3rd round very strongly, put a stamp on that fight. I'm not going to go against Nathaniel Wood here. Like I said, man, the dude is just proven to be very game, 30 years old, creeping into the prime of his career. He'll be slightly undersized here. Naimov will have that natural size advantage here. Nothing new for Nathaniel Wood. He seems to always be a little bit undersized in his matchups, and has no real effect on what he does out there, man. This dude's game. So give me Nathaniel Wood. I'm going to say he wins this fight via decision. I think there's potential that he opens up a submission, 5 submissions under his belt there. Obviously, there's a very realistic possibility if he has a lot of success with his grappling, he could set up a TKO or whatnot. I'll lean more towards a sub, though. And understand that Naimov has never been finished, so he's been very durable, very tough. So overall, yeah, I would say the most realistic possibility is Wood via decision, but there's a potential he can open up a sub, pushing the pace on Naimov. I could see him frustrating Naimov. Maybe Wood can snatch a backup, you know, at some point in the 2nd round or something like that, and maybe sink in a choke or something like that. But Wood will just be all over Naimov. That's the route I see this fight going. But again, just understand that Naimov is dangerous. So Nathaniel Wood opened up as a -366 favorite here on Jazz Sports. The line is moving towards Naimov's way. He's now a -328. It is Nathaniel Wood. Let's take a look at another line. Let's see what else we see here. Nathaniel Wood opened up as a -277. On my bookie, he's now a -303 favorite. So interesting. Both lines opening up at different starting points, so you see the movement going different ways, but kind of centering towards that -300 line, that very low -300 line. On Bet Online, he opened up as a -400. He's now a -330. So again, just that 320 range is what you're seeing from Wood. I will tell you guys this. I think that line is a little too high for my liking. I do believe that out of all these big favorites and these big underdogs, I think that Naimov is one of the more live dogs on this card. with the danger that he possesses in his striking. He's still only 29 years old, so obviously he's just going to continue to work on his takedown defense and working on creating space so he can set up those big shots. And he's coming into this fight with a lot of confidence after just going out there and knocking out a guy in Jamie Mullarkey that's no joke, okay? And Jamie Mullarkey has somewhat of a similar fighting style to Nathaniel Wood. Well-rounded. Mullarkey, even though he has more, maybe he's more known for that knockout power, he's been closing the distance on a lot of his opponents and doing that as well. So give me Nathaniel Wood. I think I made it clear where I stand on this fight, but more value on Naimov on that dog line, as steep as it is. In the lightweight division, we have Anshul Jubli taking on Mike Breeden. Jubli just won the lightweight tournament of the road to UFC. If you guys remember that, he defeated a fighter, a very fun fighter to watch, in Jeka Seregi. If you remember, he's that fighter. I think he's Indonesian, I believe, but he's a big fan of Conor McGregor's, and he really has that fun style in the cage. He's taunting his opponents and whatnot. And in that fight, Jubli really used his grappling to take complete control of that fight, as Jeka was that more of a Muay Thai striking-based fighter, okay? So, Jubli looked very fine-tuned in that fight, but it's worth noting, he's 7-0, he's undefeated as a pro. Who has he beaten at this point in time? I mean, the biggest victory I think that stands out is the Hyung Po Kim fight that he had on the road to UFC. Not a lot of big names here. I believe he is the only UFC fighter representing India or being on the UFC roster, fighting out of India, which is great. I would love to see Indian mixed martial arts step it up. Obviously they have a lot of young men. It's a huge population. I would love to see the sport pick up over there and see them start pushing some people into the octagon. Anshul Jubli is, from what I've seen and from turning over some stones, he's the most promising prospect out there right now representing India. I think he has some potential, but he's just not proven to me. Okay, he looked very, very good in that last fight, but I need to see him in there against higher level competition. On the other hand, Mike Breeden's a fighter that's very tough, and I think that he's a little bit more skilled than some of you guys believe that he is. I know he just got demolished by Terrence McKinney, but as we just saw this past Saturday, that's what Terrence McKinney does to lower level fighters, fringe UFC fighters. He'll go out there and steamroll you. Went to a decision with Natan Levy, showed a little bit of something in that fight. Natan Levy, a very tough fighter. He was knocked out against Alexander Hernandez. And then, he's just been a kind of a journeyman before that, just on the regional scene. Lost to Anthony Romero on the Contender Series. Remember, we interviewed Romero after that fight. And Romero is a good fighter. Not the most exciting fighter, didn't get a contract, but he's a fighter that goes out there and wins quite often. Not a lot of big victories here for Breeden as well. I mentioned the Eckelberg fight over in LFA. And he does have a variety of losses scattered throughout his resume. The thing is, Mike Breeden, a little bit undersized for the division. He's a scrappy dude. He's willing to exchange in the feet. He's somewhat tough. But nowadays he's going out there and he is getting finished a little more often. And 3 knockout losses out of his 6 losses, half of them coming by way of knockout. I don't know if I necessarily see Jubli getting the knockout victory, but I do favor that Jubli can go out here and fight a cerebral fight and kind of use his length a little bit. I know that he does have a 1-inch reach disadvantage, but he's 2 inches taller. I think he could use his kicks from the outside and just kind of get the better of the outside striking. I think Breeden will look to throw more combos and work his way into the inside and make this a scrappy fight. But I think that Jubli will clinch up and just fight a cerebral fight and take a decision victory here. That's the route I'm going. It's kind of hard to have any faith in Mike Breeden right now. 34 years old, coming off a brutal finish. And it's just, he's been having a tough time getting his hand raised, period. So Jubli has some real confidence going into this fight. Give me Jubli to get the job done. Now, once again, we talk about these hefty favorites scattered all throughout this card. Jubli opened up as a -553 on Jazz Sports. Obviously, that line trending the other way, which it should. He's now a -426. I think that line's still pretty high, if you ask me. I think there's more value on the dog here. And Mike Breeden, I'm not saying that I necessarily want to have money backing him. I don't really like that situation. But still, I'm not touching Jubli anywhere in the -400s. I think he needs to come down at least to the -350 range, 375 range before I'm considering him. He just needs to prove more. And look, on my bookie, he opens up as a -588, and now he's a -400. I don't understand why he opened up as such a huge favorite. I mean, he's coming off that big victory, but were the experts not really diving into his strength of schedule and who he just fought, a guy that had no grappling? Mike Breeden's actually trained at he's been training at legitimate gyms. He's been involved in the fight game for some time. He's a much more crafty veteran compared to the opponents that Jubli's faced in the past. So yes, Jubli should have the youth and just that length, like I said, the height advantage. I think he can work from the outside and maybe set up some takedowns and whatnot. But I'm not touching it at where these lines are right now, scattered all across these sports books. I think that line's too high. More value on the underdog. Give me Jubli via decision, though. I think this goes to the decision. I think Jubli uses grappling, kind of stifles Breeden. But I don't see it necessarily being a slugfest. Breeden will try to make it that type of fight, but I think Jubli will be crafty and will hang on him and sneak in some takedowns and slow the pace down. Sedriques Dumas taking on Abu Azaitar. Fight taking place in the middleweight division. Sedriques Dumas coming off that very strange victory over Cody Brundage, where Cody Brundage, with a very alarming performance. You guys know somehow I've fell into the trap of being one of those conspiracy type of dudes and questioning some of these fighters' performances, as I did when Cody Brundage fought that fight, and as I did recently when Grant Dawson fought. Again, I do say it. I do say those comments half joking, half. I want to make that clear, half joking. But again, that Cody Brundage performance, Cody was just so willing to pull guard and hold on for 15 minutes and take that decision loss. But at the same time, I do want to give Sedriques Dumas some credit for going out there and showing some evolution in his overall game, getting a much-needed victory, coming into that fight off the submission loss to Josh Fremd. Now, before that, he had a very quick standing guillotine choke over Mataj Penaz. Penaz was actually the highly touted prospect on that card, if you remember that DWCS card, and Dumas showed up as a dog and snatched up that choke. We didn't get to see the fight played out in a prolonged type of scenario. It was only 47 seconds, so obviously there's still some question marks with this kid. You know, he has a nice long frame, but we need to see more from him. Seems to be pretty snappy with his striking. I think his striking is going to come around, and he'll be a pretty good striker, especially when he's a finished product. Still only 28 years old. I just think there's some question marks around him still. And obviously, I do question Brundage when he fought him. I questioned the mindset Brundage had in that fight. Didn't give him any real resilience or any pushback, I should say. I think Abu Azaitar is a fighter that will push back against Dumas. It's not going to be a walk in the park, and Azaitar has some serious power. He's a decently well-rounded fighter. He has some things going against himself as well, though. He's 37 years old now. He'll be a little bit with a reach disadvantage in this fight. Dumas will be able to strike from the outside if he chooses to go that path. I think Azaitar may have a tough time closing the distance, but if he could, Azaitar does have power. We've seen him go out there and knock dudes out before. Ex-UFC fighters like Jack Marshman, I believe he had a knockout on him early in his career. He's had some big knockouts. He throws his shots a little bit, from the east and the west. He's a little bit wide with his striking, but if he could land the mark, he definitely can get a knockout here. And, this is a fight that I've been very back and forth with. I could easily see Dumas just being a little bit of the more smooth fighter here and just using his youth and whatnot and using the growth that he's been having as of recently just to go out here and get the job done. Abu coming off that tough loss against Marc-Andre Barriault, where he was finished in the third round. But understand that he fought a pretty tough fight early on in there in the first and second rounds. He did give some pushback to Mark, landed some big shots. Also, seemed to slow down a little bit as the fight progressed. A little bit. I'm questioning his cardio a little bit if this fight ends up going to deep waters. I hope that he's looking good on the scales. I want to see him a little bit more leaned up and whatnot. But I'm gonna take the dog here. I'm gonna take Abu Azaitar to get the job done. I can't just throw all favorites towards your guys' way, and I do believe the value is on Abu here at plus 145. Where we've seen him quite often. He opened up as a plus 207. The movement going towards Abu's way. There's potential he could land a big shot. He's pretty physically strong as well. I don't think Sedriques will have as easy of a time getting takedowns and getting top control position like he did against Brundage, which again, I am questioning that fight there, questioning the mindset of Brundage. I think Abu will give a lot more pushback, and there's just a lot more that needs to be seen by the very green Dumas. All right, so give me Abu. Abu is somewhat of a crafty veteran, has 18 pro fights. He's 37 years old, trains with some pretty big names in the game. He'll have the crowd backing him, obviously. Fight taking place over where his people are from, and he's Moroccan, but has more of a connection to the crowd out there in Abu Dhabi and whatnot. And I'll say that he gets the job done. Dumas, 9 professional fights still. Like I said, very green. And keep an eye for Abu to potentially land a big shot. Does throw some wild shots, some big shots. But if it becomes a barn burner type of affair, I think it could play out very closely, and I could see Abu taking the decision as well. More value on the Abu line, especially if you caught it early on at plus 207. Now he's plus 144. Not necessarily crazy about touching that fight in general. It just seems like there's a lot of moving parts. That's why I'm just kind of going towards the dog odds, the dog value. I just think that there's a lot of question marks with that fight, and I'll just sit back. Or if I was going to target it, I'm targeting dog odds in that fight. In the bantamweight division, we have one of the brightest prospects working his way through the game right now, and Javid Basharat taking on a proven veteran in Victor Henry. Victor Henry is a fighter that really is a crafty veteran. 29 professional fights. He finally made his way into the UFC and snagged up a couple solid victories. Victories over Tony Gravely in his last fight, a split decision victory. And of course, the Ioni Barcelos victory that he had where he took that fight on short notice, was a huge underdog and really was one of the first men to take out Barcelos, as Barcelos then started to have that decline in his performances. But Henry got him when he was still a more formidable version of himself. Okay, so you got to give Henry credit there. Now over to Javid Basharat. Him and his brother are just so fine-tuned. I have to mention his brother as well. Farid, I believe his name is. Javid and Farid Basharat. These fighters, the thing that stands out to me so much when I watch them perform, which I love, is they're so extremely well-rounded. They have great cardio. They push the pace. They put so much volume out with their striking. So if the fights are going to go to a decision, they're very, very well... they're very likely to be the guy that gets their hand raised. They can grapple. They can take the fight down to the mat. They're polished up with their jiu-jitsu. I believe he started his career under London Shoot Box, or London Shoot Fighters, whatever that gym was. I know he's now getting in a lot of work over at Extreme Couture in Vegas, I believe. I mean, they're sharp, man. They're sharp. And I'll tell you what, as much respect as I have for Victor Henry, I just have to be very clear. I think that Javid Basharat is going to be a step ahead of Victor Henry anywhere that this fight goes. I think that Javid will take complete control over this fight. You think of the fight that Victor Henry just had recently against Rafael Assunção, where he was kind of outclassed, I would say. Just really, he was a step behind that entire fight. I think that this fight will play out very similarly to that fight. I think that Javid will just be just a step ahead everywhere this fight goes. I think he'll change levels. I think he'll get this fight down to the mat a good amount of the fight. I think that he'll be on top of him. He'll use his jiu-jitsu to control Victor. I think that he'll rack up a lot of points. But I will say this, Victor Henry has shown to be extremely durable, extremely tough, and crafty in there, and he's very, very hard to finish. In fact, out of all 6 of his losses, he's never been finished. Out of 29 professional fights, he's never been finished. I'm not going to sit here and bank on Javid getting a finish here. Now, if he does, I could potentially see him in those grappling exchanges, maybe sneak in a choke, in a rear naked choke, if Victor Henry is trying to rush up to his feet and makes a mistake. But all in all, I think that Javid just cruises his way to a unanimous decision. I think that he takes a comfortable decision victory here. Javad, he's a very good fighter. He will have the crowd backing him, of course, fight taking place in Abu Dhabi. And he's another big favorite on this card. He opened up as a minus 638 on Jazz Sports. He's now a minus 433. We've been seeing so many lines throughout the 400 range. Which is not to be taken lightly. I mean, you're putting up some major juice if you're taking those fighters. Minus anything in that range. Those are high odds, but minus 638, a little ridiculous if you ask me. We could take a look at where he opened up on Bet Online. He opened up as a minus 350. I don't know if you guys can see that over here on the edge, but he opened up as a minus 350. He's still now in the 400 range. The line went the other way. He's now minus 450. If you're looking to mix Javid in a parlay, I would like to get him right around that minus 400 range. 430 and down is not horrible. I think you'll be sitting comfortable there with a leg. If you have a little parlay mixed up with him, he should come through here. He has that southpaw stance, very fluid footwork. He'll avoid danger and he'll mix things up and he'll fight a smart fight and he'll get that decision victory. Take note, this is without a doubt one of the most exciting fights on this card. This fight's going to be so much fun. Anytime Trevor Peek steps into the cage, you guys know what you're going to get from him. This guy is absolute nonstop action. He's crazy. He's a crazy man that's going out there looking to take out his opponent. He's not the most fine-tuned fighter. That's obvious. He needs to clean up a lot of things. We saw it cost him in his last fight where he took his first professional defeat against Chipe Mariscal. Now, Chipe Mariscal, he showed in his last fight, I know he injured his opponent, Jack Jenkins. Not a lot of people wanted to give him credit for that fight, but the way he used his judo, he set up that injury on Jack Jenkins. All in all, I think that Chipe Mariscal has shown to be a very solid fighter, a very polished fighter. So Chipe used his more technical striking and more technical skills to take over that fight as it progressed. But I just want to say, man, this guy Trevor Peek has some real intangibles. If he could work on polishing up certain aspects of his game, polishing up his striking, pacing himself a little bit more, not getting so overzealous with his striking, looking to finish his opponent and then setting up himself to be taken down. If he could slow certain aspects down of his game and polish them up, I think he has some real intangibles. I think that his cardio is amazing. A lot of you guys think that he has bad cardio because you don't understand the output that he's putting out throughout the early portions of his fights. So yeah, he's going to slow down a little bit, but if you understand the volume that he's pushing out, that's why he's breathing heavily, but he still is in the third rounds getting these late second wins in person and putting it on his opponents. If he slows things down, if he's getting the right training, I think that he has some real potential to hang around in the UFC and continuously put on these fun fights for us. Obviously, you can't go on a 3-4 fight losing skid and be hanging around in the UFC. Now, I think he will have an opportunity, even if he loses 3 fights, to get another opportunity just because he's such a fun fighter, and I think Dana White would give him another shot. But you got to get your hand raised, right? That's what the game's about. It's all fun to go out there and entertain us, but you got to get some W's. And I'll tell you what, I think that this is a fight that is there for him to get a W. I'll tell you why. Muhammad Yahya, I break down tape on him. I am not impressed, to say the least. He's just a very bland mid fighter. Doesn't do anything that well. I've seen holes in his game, fighting low-level competition as well. I mean, you take a look at who he's defeated, and none of these names stand out to me. All right, I've dove into all these opponents. None of them stand out to me. None of them have that much of impressive records. They have questionable records. He's been finished in all 3 of his losses. Was submitted against Dan Collins over in UAE Warriors. Was submitted by Gavin Hughes over in Bellator, and was also knocked out by Hassan Talal back in Desert Force back in 2016. So showing vulnerability to be finished as well when he loses fights. And a guy like Trevor Peek is a guy that's going to go out there and look to finish you. So that is an aspect of this match that could be dangerous for Yahya. Yahya may get knocked out, may get clipped with the big shot and not like it. Might not like the crazy pace that Peek pushes in his face. I will say that Yahya is the more polished fighter. Polished, I should say, when we're talking about his striking, he'll be a little bit more technical. He'll throw those straight shots, and he could potentially make Peek pay if Peek is just a mess out there. But you know what? I'm going with my boy Trevor Peek here. I think that this is a very winnable fight for him. His sloppiness may cost him here, but I haven't seen enough from Muhammad Yahya to say that he goes out there and gets the job done. I think, and I'm not necessarily saying this is the case, but Muhammad Yahya, I think it's debatable that he gets an opportunity to fight on a huge card like this, but the fact that it's taking place in Abu Dhabi, and he represents the United Arab Emirates, I think that he probably has some pull. It's reasonable that he gets on a card like this, but as far as his skill set goes, I haven't seen enough from him to really praise him here on the mic. So should be a fun fight. Give me Trevor Peek. I think maybe the power and just the savagery of Trevor Peek may take over this fight, and Yahya might be overwhelmed with it. It's going to be a very fun fight. Take a look at the betting line. So it's essentially a pick'em fight with a very, very slight lean on Trevor Peek. He's now roughly like a -130, -125 favorite. He opened up as the dog as well. And I think the reason why you see the line movement going his way is the more people dove into Muhammad Yahya and took a look at his strength of schedule, they realized that he's really nothing to talk about here. I know people are questioning the technical abilities of Peek, but again, as people dove into who Yahya is, I think that people were saying, oh yeah, he's not a -180 favorite in a spot like this, and you see him go from a -180 all the way up to a +107. This is a fight that I wouldn't want to have any action on. As far as picking a fighter to win the fight, I would be going I'd be going for the unders and for the, more of a finishing type props. That's the route I would go. I don't think that this fight is gonna complete all 3 rounds. I think that I think that we're going to see someone get finished here. I think Peak either can land a big shot, or I think Peak gets a little too reckless in there again and puts himself out there to potentially be finished just by blowing his load, and maybe Yahya can capitalize and get on top of him, he can get into a dominant position and potentially take the fight. I know that Peak has never been finished before, but when he goes out there and pushes the pace like he does and makes these technical mishaps, there is going to be a chance. There's going to be a possibility where he eventually does get finished. I think that's realistic. So give me the unders, give me the finish props and stuff like that. And as far as just taking a fighter, I would take Trevor Peak to get the job done, but you got to be careful there. We got the number 10th ranked flyweight fighter, Tim Elliott, taking on the number 11th ranked flyweight fighter in Muhammad Mokaev. Of course, Muhammad Mokaev, one of the top MMA prospects in the game. He now has 4 UFC victories under his belt. He's already gone out there and beat legitimate fighters like Charles Johnson. He also has a victory over the respectable Cody Durden, who's really been on a tear. And that was his UFC debut, where he went out there and finished him within a minute, under a minute. That was a big victory. The Charles Johnson fight, I think people took a little bit of a step back on his potential. I would say I did, just the way that fight was kind of a slow-paced, grueling victory. He used his grappling a lot, and I kind of took a step back on Mokaev, but I love the way he's rebounded in his last 2 fights, getting finishes in both of them, late finishes, where he submitted Filio and Malcolm Gordon. So once again, just showing how dangerous he is from a finishing perspective. He's only 23 years old, so much room for growth. This is a fighter that started extremely early. And then Tim Elliott, man, he's a 36-year-old veteran in the game. He does it all well. Doesn't do really anything great. Can get a little sloppy at times with his grappling, but also uses that funky, wild style to give his opponents trouble. Sometimes it's hard for his opponents to get reads on him, and he frustrates them, and he steals rounds. Does Elliott have the potential to make this an ugly fight and hang around for this potentially to play it somewhat close? I think that you can argue that, but if you really want to be honest about it, Mokaev's just going to be a step ahead. Elliott makes mistakes in his grappling as well. When he's doing all these wild scrambles, he puts himself out there to be submitted, or puts himself in vulnerable positions where the opposition can take advantage of that, and a fighter like Muhammad Mokaev will take advantage of that, and that's what I most likely see happening here. I think Tim Elliott will get a little reckless with these scrambles and whatnot, and I could see Mokaev controlling him and really inflicting some damage and potentially getting a finish on Tim Elliott. So, Tim Elliott, a great dude. You guys all know the background story where his wife, Gina Mazzani, an ex-UFC fighter, was cheating on him even on the night of their wedding. If you guys haven't heard that story, it was absolutely disgusting. And it was with his best friend, a fighter that I interviewed here on the show. I won't even say his name, that rat, but you guys know what I'm talking about. He's now fighting over in BKFC, and I hope he gets starched. He's going to be fighting my boy, Tony Loco Soto, I hope he starches him. But I have no respect for dudes that do that type of stuff. So again, I just think that Muhammad Mokaev is going to be too polished up here for Elliott. I know Elliott's had some recent success in the cage, victories over Victor Altamirano, had a victory over Tager Ulanbekov, a fellow Dagestani fighter, and Tager is a fighter that's had his ups and downs, but he's still a promising fighter, and that was a close fight. A lot of people thought Tager won, but there's no question that Elliott did enough to potentially get his hand raised there. He'd had success, and he's been doing his thing, man. He's been doing his thing. Typically, when Elliott fights upper-tier fighters, though, he doesn't get the job done, and I think that's how this fight plays out. Muhammad Mokaev, I will say that Muhammad Mokaev will potentially get a late submission. I'll take a second or third round submission. I think Elliott hangs tough early on. Of course, there's legitimate potential that Mokaev lands a big shot if they just go to war right from the get-go. Maybe something wild lands. But I'm favoring Elliott to kind of survive, work some crafty type of maneuvers in the cage, and let the fight start to progress. And then eventually he makes a mistake, and Muhammad Mokaev gets a submission in the second or third rounds. That's the route I'm going here. Mokaev will have that reach advantage. He'll have a 4-inch reach advantage. And I could see him having a lot of success in this fight as it progresses. He's a minus 526 right now on my bookie, opened up as a minus 666, an extremely high line. Another very high line on this card, a potential parlay piece. I think Mokaev gets the job done here. If you can get this in the minus 400 range, that'd be great if that line continues to trend towards that way. Not sure if that's going to happen. I could see it actually bouncing back the other way a little bit. Maybe Mokaev settles in around a minus 550, minus 600. If you take a look at the lines that have been next to his name so far throughout his UFC career, very high lines on him, and for good reasons, man. Just he's lightning quick, does everything very well. He's the new age of MMA, and I think that he gets a submission in the second or third rounds. And also, if you want to target those types of prop bets, and he's also a potential parlay piece, but don't pay too high of a price on that tag. Get a respectable line there. Make it worth the while. Kicking the main card off, we have Saad Nurmagomedov taking on Muin Gafurov. Gafurov fighting out of Tajikistan. This is a fighter, still only 27 years old. I think that he does have legitimate potential to hang around in the UFC. He's a fun fighter to watch. Even before he stepped foot in the octagon, there was fun fights that he was involved in. If you remember, over at ONE FC, he had a great fight against John Lineker. Remember John Lineker? John Hands of Stone Lineker, an absolute knockout artist. What a shame the UFC let him go. But Gafurov held his own at certain points in that fight. I think that he's showcased that his striking is dangerous. Where I have seen flaws in his game is where he's been stifled a little bit with the grappling. John Castaneda defeated him in his last fight, had about 5 minutes of control time on him. I'm not really that high on John Castaneda, to be honest with you guys. Before that, 2 knockout victories over in the LFA promotion. If you remember the Dana White's Contender Series loss he had against Chad Enhellinger, that was a fight that he was really controlled and some wild scrambles and whatnot. Chad used his veteran savvy grappling skill set to get the job done there. Okay, so I do believe that Saad Nurmagomedov can go to some of his grappling skills to have success here. Now, he's not a fighter that has typically consistently done that in the cage. We've seen him pull off some nasty submissions and whatnot, but we really haven't seen him go out and consistently look to use his grappling for a lengthy time in the cage. He's willing to trade on the feet, so I do believe that Gafurov's going to have some opportunities here. I will say this, Jonathan Martinez, you guys know he was an official play of mine this past weekend. Martinez finishing 2 of his last 3 opponents due to leg kicks. I did believe that Saad Nurmagomedov won that fight, though, okay? So that was a big victory over Jonathan Martinez, in my opinion, a close fight. I thought he won that fight. Victory over Sedriques Kakrakhmanov, a very good fighter, an under-the-radar type of fighter. Victory over Douglas Silva de Andrade. Cody Stamen, that's a very good fighter. So he's been doing his thing. His lone loss was to Raoni Barcelos back in 2019. That was the more formidable version of Barcelos, the old school version before he fell off a cliff. Okay, knockout over Ricardo Ramos, a decision victory over Justin Scoggins. I remember that fight very well. That was his debut this in the summer of 2018. And listen, I also want to mention that the submission victory that he had over Sedriques Kakrakhmanov, that was very impressive, as well as the Cody Stamen fight. Okay, just understanding that not only is he an electrifying striker, he has dangerous submission skills under his belt there. So I am high on Nurmagomedov. I am picking him to get the job done here. He's 31 years old. I know he's coming into this fight extremely hungry after not getting the nod in the Jonathan Martinez fight. He needs to fight a smart fight because his opponent here is dangerous on the feet. He will throw some heavy shots towards his way. So if Nurmagomedov gets reckless out there, there is potential for him to get caught. He needs to change levels, mix things up, and just be a step ahead the entire fight. If there's one other thing you could potentially argue for Gafurov is the fact that maybe we've seen Nurmagomedov slow down a little bit late in fights. Maybe he can try to push the pace and try to take over late in this fight. All in all, though, I just think that Saad Nurmagomedov is the way to go. I think that I'm still very high on him, and I think there's potential for him to snag a sub. But even if it goes to a decision, he'll be outlanding Gafurov, and he'll just be mixing things up enough to get the job done. So that's how I see the fight here. Saad Nurmagomedov, one of the few favorites on this card that are not a ridiculous favorite. The tag's not crazy. He's a minus 217 right now in my bookie. That's a reasonable line if you like Saad there. If you're high on Muin Gafurov, maybe obviously you don't want to target that line, but I think that it's a reasonable line. I like Saad. I think he bounces back with the victory here. And again, I think that Martinez fight will have him very, very sharp here and extremely motivated. And I think his cardio and everything will be very fine-tuned for this opportunity. Give me Saad Nurmagomedov to get the job done, just being sharper anywhere this fight goes. In the middleweight division, we have one of the top up-and-comers in this division, Ikram Aliskerov, taking on Warlley Alves. Aliskerov was one of the fighters that I talked about early on that had a replacement opponent as Nasruddin Imavov pulled out. In steps Warlley Alves, who is a dangerous Brazilian fighter, has some knockout power, has some submission skills as well. This is a guy that has a guillotine choke over Colby Covington way back in the day. He's still only 32 years old, but he's been on a little bit of a tough streak as of recently. He's been taking some L's as he just took a split decision loss to Nicholas Dalby, got knocked out against Jeremiah Wells, had a knockout victory over Minor Lezez, showing that knockout power that he possesses, submitted against Randy Brown, knocked out against James Krause. I want to emphasize some of those losses because he is a fighter that when he tastes defeat, he's very vulnerable to being finished. Especially as of recently. Okay, this is a guy that can be finished. Ikram Aliskerov is a bona fide finisher, and he's a finisher in a diverse amount of ways. He'll knock you out or he'll set up that sub. We saw the beautiful submission that he set up on Dana White's Contender Series. I like the way that he had a very slow-paced start to that fight. He was very cerebral. He took his time as he eventually set up that sub and just he knew that he was the superior fighter in there against Mario Souza. I believe Mario Souza was the opponent. Then he worked his way into the UFC, and then he went out there, was very patient with his striking before setting up some beautiful counters and some beautiful striking exchanges against Phil Haas, where he knocked him out as well. He's 14-1. Okay, and yes, that was Mario Souza. He's 14-1. And you want to scroll down to that loss that he took back in 2019. It was against Khamzat Chimaev. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with that highlight knockout where Chimaev hit him with a nasty, I want to say it was an uppercut, right? It was some type of step-in uppercut. You guys know what I'm talking about, that viral video there. And listen, lost to one of the best fighters in the game, a guy we'll be talking about in a second. After that, went out there, submitted Dennis Teolinin, had a victory over Noshan Burrell, Mario Souza, Phil Haas. These are decent names in the game, so it's understandable that he's getting some hype behind him. And believe it or not, I think the fact that he even lost to Khamzat Chimaev, just the fact that he was in the cage with him, somehow hyped his name up to even gain more respect, because a lot of people are high on him. I know he's a Dagestani fighter. They typically get their respect regardless too. He's well-rounded. But I think that overall recipe has led to people being extremely high on him. I still need to see a little bit more from him. I think that when he fights maybe that best of the best in this division, he may fall a little short, as he did when he fought Chimaev the first time. Sometimes I could see a little bit more fine-tuned, aggressive strikers maybe being able to land on him at times. He's very patient, and he's waiting for those counter shots, and he's just out of range. But some of the guys that know how to find the mark can land on him, I do believe. But let me not be too harsh on him. I like what I've seen from him. I think he's going to make a run in this division, but I do believe that when he fights the best of the best, you'll start to see him take some L's. I heard a lot of people, let me say this too, I heard a lot of people saying that when Khamzat Chimaev's fight with Paulo Costa fell out, and Ikram's fight fell out with Nasruddin Imavov, that they should have made that rematch. I thought that makes absolutely no sense. At this point in time, Aliskerov has not made a name for himself. He needs to make a name for himself before he builds up that fight there. Okay, it's kind of reminiscent too, if you remember, the Joe Duffy, Conor McGregor situation, although it was a little opposite because Duffy had the victory over the big name in McGregor. But nobody, us hardcore fans understand that rematch would be cool, but the regular casuals that are coming in are not really going to be familiar with Aliskerov. It makes so much more sense to have a Kamaru Usman face off with Khamzat. I want to see Khamzat have those big fights now. Let Aliskerov build his name up more so. Just has a couple victories here on the big stage, so need to see more from him. Let me get back to this fight before I'm chirping about all this other stuff. Ikram's going to be the more fine-tuned fighter. If he's patient, he's going to set up a potential finish here. I think he could set up a sub or some ground and pound. The mistake that he doesn't want to make, he doesn't want to step into a firefight early on, because Warlley Alves can snatch up a submission. He can knock you out. He has big-time power. And if Ikram fights an intelligent fight, like I do believe that he will, he's going to take over this fight. And I think that he's going to get a finish. I do. I think he's going to get a finish on Warlley Alves. Again, I mentioned how Randy Brown got that submission as of recently, the knockout James Krause had over him, the knockout Jeremiah Wells had over him. 3 of his 4 losses have came by way of finish. and he's taking this fight on short notice. I could easily see him flaking out and being finished here. Ikram can set up a finish in a variety of ways. Give me Ikram Aliskerov to get Warlley Alves out of this fight before the completion of the second round. Okay, that's the route I'm going there. And we'll take a look at the betting line here. Ikram Aliskerov, another betting line in the minus 400s, opened as a minus 432. He's now at minus 451. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts to touch that minus 500 range, and we see him right around in minus 500, 525, 550 type of favorite. The more people look at, the more they look at Warlley Alves and realize he's taking this fight on short notice, traveling over there. He just has so many things stacked up against him here. So give me Ikram Aliskerov. He can set up this finish in a variety of ways. It's really hard to say if he pulls off the sub or the knockout because he does both so well. Okay, so he's going to have some opportunities to do a couple different things there. So I would just go for the under or for the Ikram Aliskerov inside the distance if you're looking to target this fight. Or this is another legitimate parlay piece. You know, is there a little bit more danger surrounding this line based on the fact that Warlley Alves does have fight-ending ability and that this is a big-time, some big boys scrapping in the middleweight division? You could argue that, but I think Aliskerov gets the job done here, gets that finish. I'm very happy to see Magomed Ankalaev step back into the cage. Obviously, that last fight for him was very frustrating. I thought that he should have got the nod there and should have been the UFC's light heavyweight champion. You guys know I've been saying he's the uncrowned champ for some time, and things just played out in a manner where that belt slipped out of his hand. And he's just such a fine-tuned fighter, man, such a well-rounded fighter. He could strike with you. He can knock you out. He can grapple. You know, and then you got Johnny Walker, who's an extremely dangerous striker. Obviously, he's going to be live to potentially land a shot because he's live to land a knockout on anybody. When you're talking about the light heavyweight division with big boys throwing down and the wild stuff that Johnny Walker will throw your way, I'm not going to sit here and just tell you this is going to be a walk in the park for Ankalaev. Obviously, I think you guys know which route I'm going to go with my pick. But Johnny Walker is a dangerous fighter. And ever since the Jamal Hill loss, it seems that he's had a real resurgence in his career. I think that he's really got his head right and has had his training going well. I think he's the best version that we've ever seen from him, even including when he came onto the UFC scene and was just finishing all those guys early on. I think he's obviously a more complete and dangerous fighter right now. You know, coming off a decision victory against Anthony Smith, looked good in that fight, knocked out Paul Craig, submitted Ion Cutelaba, and then before that, he was knocked out by Jamal Hill, the former light heavyweight champ. Had that exhibition match against Thiago Santos where they just played patty cake out there. Knocked out Ryan Spann before that as well. Another big victory that he had kind of mixed up in the mix over here. Lost this to Nikita Krylov and was knocked out by Corey Anderson. Corey Anderson is the fighter that kind of shut the door on that early hype of Johnny Walker before he had to build it back up. Corey Anderson, he's an absolute stud, wreaking havoc over in Bellator. So, and then we could also mention the big knockouts, right? Knocked out Khalil Roundtree, I believe, in the clinch. Knocked out Justin Ledet, Misha Serkinov. Just knocked out all these guys in such a wild fashion. He has that rangy frame, you know, and he's just such a fun fighter to watch. Let me cut to the chase here, though. As much of a fan as I am of Johnny Walker, kind of reminds me of Apollo Costa, another very fun Brazilian fighter. I love his style and all that. Magomed Ankalaev is going to have so many opportunities in this fight, especially if he slows the pace down and sets things up. I think Ankalaev can very well knock out Johnny Walker, as Johnny Walker's looking for his own knockout and just getting a little bit wild with his shots, coming from east and west, as I like to say, a little bit wide with his shots. Ankalaev has beautiful footwork and can set up a nice knockout. But if he wants to go to the grappling as the fight progresses as well, I think that he'll have some success there as well. Not to say that Johnny Walker's you know, an easy opponent just to take down and maul down on the mat. I mean, he's showcased a 60% takedown defense rate throughout his career, and interestingly enough, has a 100% takedown defensive rate when he's shooting takedowns. Not that he does that often. That's not going to matter here because he's not shooting on Magomed at all. And if he does choose to shoot, obviously Magomed would stuff that quite easily. 86% takedown defensive rate. I know it says Magomed has a 29% takedown offensive accuracy. Don't even put too much interest in that number there. Magomed does have solid offensive grappling, and I can easily see him getting on top of Johnny Walker and raining down some ground and pound. But more importantly, the technical southpaw, Magomed Ankalaev, I believe he is going to get the better of the striking exchanges, and it's going to be very likely to land a knockout shot on Johnny Walker here. I think that he sets up a finish on Johnny Walker. Such a dangerous fight taking place in the light heavyweight division. I think that Magomed is going to come out here very hungry. After that decision didn't go his way the last time, I think that he's going to want to put a stamp on this fight. I think that he sets up a finish on Johnny Walker. I think Johnny Walker will be more than willing to oblige in a brawl and in a wild type of fight, and I think that Ankalaev will be more technical, and that southpaw stance will give Walker some problems there, and he's going to land, and he's going to knock Johnny Walker out. It's crazy. Magomed Ankalaev, a couple little mishaps. I mean, he should be 20-0 right now. A mistake with 1 second left on the clock after dominating Paul Craig, gets caught in a sub, and then the issue there with Jan Blachowicz. I mean, he should be 20-0. He should be the UFC light heavyweight champion of the world, but he has time now to right the ship. He's still only 31 years old. And take note, Johnny Walker has a 7-inch reach advantage. Not worried about that. Magomed Ankalaev has beautiful footwork. He will close the distance, and I think he gets a knockout victory. Okay, Magomed Ankalaev is a minus 385 roughly. You look across the board, opened up as a minus 395. He crept down to a minus 468, and now it's back in the high minus 300 type of range, minus 385. I would say this much. This is another one of those fights where you have the superior fighter in Ankalaev, but it's a light heavyweight matchup with two dangerous strikers. Sometimes wild things happen. Johnny Walker can go out here and he can land a knockout. I wouldn't be shocked if we see that. On a crazy card like this, you're going to see some crazy things happen. Johnny Walker is the type of fighter that can really pull something off like that. All in all, though, Magomed is such a fine-tuned fighter. He can go to the grappling if he needs to. And I like Ankalaev here. Do I like this high line, the minus 385 line? You know, as much as I say, you know, that's a little bit of a dangerous fight. You want to be careful with it. I just think Ankalaev is so clutch, and I just see him coming through here. So potential parlay piece there as well. Another potential parlay piece. See if that line dips back the other way. If you can get it around 350, I think that would be great. 330, that would be great. Up in the minus 400 range. Not really crazy about that. But Magomed Ankalaev will be the light heavyweight champion in the near future. Mark my words on that. I said that years ago, and I stick to those words. Kamaru Usman, the former welterweight champion of the world. Dana White accidentally slipped up on the mic the other day and said the greatest welterweight champion of all time. Obviously, you know, he was a little off his rocker there. There's no question that Georges St. Pierre was the much more superior welterweight champion when you take a look at their resumes. I'm sorry. If you disagree, you can hit the comment section up below. We could debate that all day. Some of you guys like to say that Kamaru Usman had faced the stiffer competition nowadays. Obviously, you guys are just newer to the game and don't really understand the level of competition that GSP was facing off against. I would take GSP at his prime any day over Kamaru Usman. I know it's going to ruffle some of your guys' feathers, but that's how I feel. Kamaru Usman, I would say, is the second greatest welterweight of all time. Obviously, Matt Hughes up there and whatnot. Now, he's taking on Khamzat Chimaev. It's worth noting this fight is taking place at 185 pounds. This is the first time we're going to see Kamaru Usman fighting in this division. They baited Usman into taking this fight by the fact that if he gets a victory here, that he gets an immediate shot at Sean Strickland to become the middleweight champion of the world. That's a very appetizing offer there. If Usman could become the middleweight champion of the world, you put that on his resume. I mean, what a feather in his cap. He's already one of the greatest fighters of all time. But I think that he fell into the trap here because Khamzat Chimaev, man, is not a fighter that you want to take on, first off, up in the middleweight division. In general, anyway, but up in the middleweight division, I do feel that favors Khamzat Chimaev. I think that he is going to be, I think that he'll fill into this frame even more so. We've seen him have success in the middleweight division. I think that Usman is really a welterweight fighter. It'll be interesting to see how he looks on the scales. Kamaru Usman, I'm going to stick to what I told you guys in the past after that Leon Edwards rematch, okay? I know some of you guys disagree. I feel that Kamaru Usman took a major step back when he fought that fight. I think that age caught up with him. You hear the stories about the damage he has in his knees. And some of you guys will say, oh, Leon Edwards is just a bad stylistic matchup. He has good takedown defense. He's a great striker. I really want you guys, if you really want to argue that, go put ample time studying the tape of that fight, and you will see the movement of Kamaru Usman is not the same that it once was. Okay, he was extremely slow from the moment that fight kicked off. In the first round, the second round, he was so slow with his striking and with his leg movement. And I don't even necessarily think it was just from being knocked out the first time around. It's like his body is just catching up with him. Maybe his mental game. He's not the same fighter. I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to be so much quicker than him. And I think that Khamzat Chimaev is going to get the finish in this fight. I'm telling you right now, I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to knock him out. That's what I see happening. I think that Kamaru Usman is going to, Kamaru Usman has a beautiful jab and he has striking skills. And I think that he'll look to clash on the feet. I think that two good grapplers will kind of stifle each other and we'll see these guys start to strike it out. And I think that Khamzat Chimaev is going to crack him with a big shot. It's going to hurt him. That's what I see happening here, okay? Now, I will say this. If Kamaru Usman can somehow rewind the clock and we could see a vintage version of himself, a similar version to what we saw when he faced off against Gilbert Burns, obviously he would be live here. I just don't think he's the same fighter. I know he's only 36 years old, but I'm going off. I just rewatched that Leon Edwards fight, the last fight that he had, and I just was not impressed, man. And I don't see how all of a sudden you take a short notice fight and you look any better here. I mean, maybe he was being prepared for the situation. Maybe he knew it was a very realistic situation. Maybe he knows that he feels good and maybe he feels rested up and without having to do a weight cut. Maybe he feels prepared for the situation. He'll have a 1-inch reach advantage, even though he's 2 inches shorter. I just think that Khamzat Chimaev is going to be too much, and I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to land a big shot in this fight, and I think he's going to finish Kamaru Usman, okay? I'm telling you guys now, I think he's going to finish him. I'm favoring a knockout TKO type of thing where he lands some big shots on him against the cage and finishes him up, okay? So we will start to see the demise of Kamaru Usman, who will now be on a 3-fight losing skid after he loses this fight. But let's put some respect on Usman's name. I have nothing but respect for him. I know some of you guys get mad at me when you feel I'm going after him. Nothing but respect towards Usman's way. It's just when you want to try to put him over GSP and you want to say certain things like that, I'm gonna come back at you guys. All right, so you guys, we can debate it in the comment section. Hit me up below. Who is the greatest welterweight of all time, GSP or Kamaru Usman? Let's get it straight here. All right, we'll pull up the betting line. You guys know we're going to see another big favorite. Khamzat Chimaev opened up as a -320, line bouncing back the other way on Jazz Sports, touched a -202. He's now all the way back to a -284, almost a -300 favorite. Roughly, we're seeing the line just under that -300 range, with him opening up towards the 300 range, and it's kind of dipping. A little bit of respect coming back on Usman. I think that Chimaev will settle right in at that -300 line. 3-1 favorite. You could target a finish on him if you can get a solid line on that. Is it another solid parlay piece? I would argue to you that we have a decent parlay piece. I know I'm throwing a lot of parlay pieces towards your guys' way. I think you have some options here. Khamzat Chimaev is going to get his hand raised, in my opinion, this upcoming Saturday. We got the rematch. Islam Makhachev taking on Alexander Volkanovski. The first time around, it was one of the greatest championship fights that we've ever seen. Big respect for Volkanovski for bumping up in weight and looking to go out there and snatch the lightweight champion of the world. I mean, he's an absolute warrior. In my opinion, he's starting to get up there with being able to throw his name on Mount Rushmore. That's how great of a champion he is and how great of a UFC fighter that he is. A lot of people argued and thought that he won the first time around. If he would have got that victory and would have been the lightweight champion right now, I mean, that's what I'm talking about. You're talking about almost some Mount Rushmore type of stuff. If he goes out here, takes the rematch against Islam Makhachev, almost nullifying that previous loss, in my opinion. If he goes out here, gets the finish or gets the victory here, it almost put a stamp as if he won that first time around, okay? I thought that last fight was so damn close, man. There's a couple different ways you can go with the potential 10-8 in the fifth and this and that. It was just such a close fight, man. You can't argue that Islam had a lot of success with his grappling early on throughout that fight as well. Makhachev is such a fine-tuned fighter, man. He's the more naturally larger guy. He has the bigger frame, 4 inches taller, even though Volkanovski has that 1.5-inch reach advantage, which is crazy. Listen, you guys know I'm a huge Volkanovski fan, and I always love to sit here on the mic and make you guys remember that even though he's Australian, he is half Greek, half Macedonian, okay? He's half Greek. You guys know I'm a Greek American, and everybody's always loving to rep where their fighters where they're from. So, I got to show some love to he's got that Greek blood running through his veins just like I do, and arguably one of the best fighters of all time. And this dude is, he probably used to be in the battlefields fighting with under Alexander the Great. Maybe he's from the lineage of Alexander the Great. All right. All jokes aside here, Alexander Volkanovski is an absolute bull. The major question mark I have with this fight, obviously, is the fact he's taken this fight on short notice, which is somewhat of a disappointment for me, because I wanted to see this rematch so bad, but I wanted to see Volkanovski have a full camp for this fight. He feels he's ready to go, and maybe that is the case. If he's really ready to go and he was really preparing for a fight like this, obviously he can go out there and get the job done. I mean, it was razor close the first time around. That being said, you know, as much as I would love to pick Volkanovski here, as much as I'm going to be rooting for Volkanovski here, Islam Makhachev was training for this date. He edged him out the last time around. You know, he's going to be using that grappling early on, and I think he's going to look to really push the pressure and the pace on Volkanovski. And one of the tools that Volkanovski had the first time around was the cardio, right? He had the cardio advantage in that fight, and that's what kind of led him to potentially and almost take that fight. Is he going to have the cardio advantage again in this rematch, as Makhachev was training for this date and Volkanovski wasn't? Last time Volkanovski was fighting in Australia against Makhachev. Now he's fighting in the backyard of Makhachev over there in Abu Dhabi. Makhachev's gonna have the crowd behind him. I gotta lean Islam Makhachev, man. I have to. I hope Volkanovski could pull the upset off, but I think that the respectable way to go here, the more professional way to go, is to take Islam based on the scenario and the circumstances. But if there's one fighter that you do not want to count out, it is Alexander Volkanovski. He is cut from a completely different cloth, and he is more than live to pull off the upset here, as he is as high as a plus 201 underdog, plus 215 underdog, more than a 2-to-1 underdog here. So potential value on that dog line, in my opinion. This fight, if Volkanovski is prepared and has his cardio and conditioning ready to go, he could easily win this fight. But, you know, again, I made it clear why I'm on Makhachev. I'm not crazy about taking the Makhachev line, anywhere from the minus 220 to 250 type of lines. I don't want to target that. I think that Volkanovski's live here. He showed it in the last fight. And again, if there's a guy you can't count out, it is Volkanovski. So I'm not liking any type of value next to Makhachev unless the line completely creeps back the other way and you're getting something respectable, minus 160, 170, which I just don't think is going to be the case. All right, so give me Islam Makhachev to win a decision, and I think his cardio will be even better than the last times after he's seen what Volkanovski is made of. So Islam will just be a little bit more prepared, and he'll be a little bit more of the naturally large dude, in my opinion, or in for fact, and that will pay dividends in the fight. Islam Makhachev via decision. All right, guys, that's going to close this episode out. Been chirping it up on the mic here for a second. Hopefully this video is insightful and helpful for you guys to make some money on this card. Don't forget, we're going to have some big action on this card. If you want to work with me, shoot me a message. We're hot right now, coming off another profitable event. And I got to leave you guys with some closing thoughts here. With everything that's going on in the world, man, I can sit on the mic and have so much to talk about, but I know a lot of you guys don't want to hear that crap. It's everywhere you look anyway, so, you know, something like this is a little bit of a getaway. But I just want to say this before I get into some more joyful or comical type of conversations. Just want to make sure I note, man, especially my fellow Americans, just make sure you guys are safe out there. Make sure you guys are prepared out there, if you guys know what I'm saying, at all times. Don't ever be one of those sit and duck types of people that always thinks everything's okay. Be more of a paranoid, prepared type of person, okay? Always watch your surroundings and be prepared to be able to defend yourself, if you know what I'm saying. All right, so on that note, I also want to say, what about these shirts? Do some of you guys have these shirts where they just seem to fit you forever? You know, I found that kind of funny. I was looking through my closet. I got like 3 or 4 of these shirts that I've had for like 10 years, and they fit still so crisply, if that's even a real word, but they fit me so crisp. And why can't all shirts just be like those shirts? You know what I'm saying? There's all these other shirts that just get raggedy and stretched out, even though they have nice designs. And I wish I could just find whoever makes those shirts that fit so perfectly for years and years, and they withstand all the punishment of the washing machine and you ripping them off when you're drunk late at night. They just always fit you so good. And whoever makes those shirts, shout out to you. And I know you guys have a couple of those up in your closet that you've been wearing for like 10, 15 years, and they just always fit the body nice. All right, guys, let me know if you have a couple of those, and I hope you guys are all having a great week out there, and I hope you guys are all safe out there. And shit, times are crazy, man, but much love to y'all. Signing out, Teller.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.